Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think if you could just show me your hand if you can hear me and if everything is going well, perhaps raise your hand. I think you can do that inside the webinar tool, or if one of the organizers should just let me know that everyone can hear me and everything's going well. All right, allow me to briefly introduce myself and then let's get started. I'm going to be talking for about 45 minutes. I'm going to try to go quickly for 45 minutes, then to allow time for questions, because I think the most important thing we can probably do today is make me available as an editor at Cell Press to answer questions about both about our content, about our journals, but also about how to write a paper, how to submit a paper, how best to do this thing we call scientific publishing. So there's my title. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So first, let me introduce, let's see here. There we go. Briefly, what we're going to do, I'm going to talk about Cell Press, who we are as a publishing company, why you might want to publish with us, also why you should read us, what we look for in a paper when it comes in, some tips on preparing a manuscript, and I hope you'll find those really useful because all sorts of advice out there about how to write a paper, and some of it I think is actually wrong. Tips on submitting a manuscript to Cell Press, the process that happens after you've submitted your paper, how we make our decisions, what happens after that, whether you might revise your paper, transfer it, appeal the decision, what happens after the paper is published, and how we will promote it and things like that. Excuse me. And then just a few author resources at Cell Press and at Elsevier. We'll end with question and answer. Now, I think it's important for me to emphasize that I'm an editor at Cell Press. We are a particular group of journals that I'll tell you about in a moment. And we have our own particular ways of doing things. We have our own particular emphasis on the kinds of papers that we publish. And so some of the tips and some of the answers to questions that I'll give are kind of specific to Cell Press. They might not apply to a different publisher or even to a different discipline like engineering or something like that. So please keep that in mind. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, and perhaps then we'll discover some of the different ways that other publishers or other journals or other sciences do their thing. So first of all, here's who Cell Press is. So 15 primary research journals. The journal Cell is our flagship journal. That's one of the most famous biomedical research journals in the world. We made our name over the decades publishing biomedical research, life sciences to be more exact, but lately have added, in the last couple of years, have added two physical science journals. So you'll see Chem, which is of course a chemistry journal, and Joule, which is a journal of energy science. We have several partner journals, including eBiomedicine, which is a collaborative journal between Cell Press and The Lancet, and publishes, as you might guess, papers that unite biology and medical science. We have 15 review journals, the Trends journals. I want to particularly emphasize this as well today. These are top review journals where you can go to kind of learn about new areas and get the basics, the background in areas perhaps a little bit out of your area. Cell Press then, of course, is part of Elsevier, which publishes thousands of journals. How to find us. So here are a series of screenshots from the EKB, the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. You'll see how you will go about sort of logging in and finding us. So this is the main page, I believe, where you will either register or log in. This is the sign-in page that you would see when you do that. So once you're signed in, this is, I believe, the home page where you find all of the different resources at the EKB. There's a search engine here, but you'll notice that you're being directed up at the top there to click on sources. So when the sources page looks like this, and you'll need to scroll down a ways to find Cell Press. And there we are right there. Once you click on Cell Press, you'll get a click here button, Cell Press. and then there's the homepage of Cell Press. And when you get to this homepage, which you could get to any other way on the internet, but if you have come through the EKB, you're logged in to full text content of every single journal, every single review journal, everything at Cell Press. Just a quick note that there are a lot of things on the Cell Press website that are besides journals. We run, for example, meetings called symposia, smaller meetings called lab links. We have podcasts and webinars, all sorts of things that you'll want to explore to find resources to help you either get to the experts in your field, to read papers in your field, to read papers in other fields, or perhaps to find advice about publishing itself. So why would you publish at Cell Press, or why does anyone publish at Cell Press? So our journals are high visibility with a broad audience. We have a reputation for strong, rigorous science. All the journals at Cell Press have in-house professional editors, all of whom have PhDs, and the vast majority of whom have done postdoctoral fellowships. That makes us sort of impartial people who stand in. Yep,
Stephen, can I just interrupt? I can see some comments from our attendees that the presentation is not moving. Would you please raise your hand if everything is moving, is okay? Can you see the presentation moving, or this is a special case? For our attendees, if you can raise your hands, please. Okay, some of them are raising their hand, means that the presentation is moving. Okay, so please, for any of our attendees, if you have any questions, you can send the questions, and I will respond to the questions to you directly. Yes, Stephen, you continue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, because we want to make sure everyone can see what's going on.
Yes.
Okay. Editors at Cell Press actively engage authors and reviewers. We go to meetings. We're integrated into the scientific community. It's our job to maintain high scientific standards. This phrase about diminishing returns is just simply saying that when a paper is struggling in review at some point, then it's the best to encourage the authors to go to a different journal. But anyway, the other thing on the happy side, also, once a paper is published in one of our journals, we work pretty hard to make sure the world sees it. We sometimes do previews, which are small little review articles, audio, video interviews. We have a blog called Crosstalk, where we sometimes interview authors. We do press releases, and we use Facebook and Twitter to promote papers. Okay, well, let's get to something a little bit more practical. So what makes a strong manuscript in the eyes of an editor at Cell Press? And the most important thing is that there's an important message of the paper that's going to be of interest to a broad audience. But also, a strong manuscript is presented logically. You can follow what's going on, why it's important, how each sort of step leads to the next one. And then the significance is really clear. It isn't hidden somewhere in a figure legend. I'm going to do some quick general points here, and then we'll come to specifics on some of these things. But I want to emphasize really strongly today that the title and the abstract are probably are easily the most important parts of your paper. If you're publishing a paper in biomedical science, it will almost certainly appear on PubMed, the world's largest, I think, biomedical database of abstracts. And it's possible that many people will find your paper simply because they're searching for topics like yours on PubMed or on a similar database. And so how you write the title and the abstract is going to determine...
Stephen, I'm sorry for interruption again, but again, it looks like that the presentation is not moving. Can you please make sure that, are you on a slideshow mode?
I believe so.
Because I'm receiving a lot of questions regarding this part. Let me go back again to the audiences.
Can we see it now?
So can someone tell me that comment that it's moving and it's just an internet issue? I'm watching the questions, but yes, it's moving now. Okay, continue. Yes, it's changing. Okay, you can continue, Stefan. I'm receiving it's okay now from them. Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
All right. Hey,
Okay, thank you.
and I'm sorry about that, folks.
By the way, by the way, we will be also be recording the presentation, and also we will send it to all who registered. So thank you very much also for following us on this. Yes,
Yes.
Stefan, go ahead.
Good. Thanks for making that point. We are recording my words, and this presentation will be freely available to you. I think I'll also stop and say at the very last slide will have my email address on it, and I would welcome questions and comments there as well. So what we were talking about is some just general points and hints about writing a paper. So the importance of the title and the abstract, but also this word story. It's really smart to think of writing a paper as telling a story. Of course, it's not a fairy tale or a silly story, but it should be a narrative of a question and a search for answers to that question, a set of answers to the question, and then some discussion about what you think it means. It's a narrative. It's not just a list of bullet points of data that your audience has to work to figure out what it means. So you want to ensure that your paper has a logical layout of arguments and flow, and that might mean that the paper is told in a different order than it actually happened. This might sound strange, but it's not at all. The logical flow of an argument in which you write a paper that says, here is our question and here's what we think the answer is, the actual order in which you did the experiments might very well have been different. So make use of summary statements. This is a hint that simply says that say at the end of, if you divide your results section into 4 subsections, for example, perhaps each of those subsections corresponds to a figure. It's really smart at the end of each of those sections to have a summary statement, something like, these data indicate that X causes Y. Sum it all up so your audience can sort of catch up with you. Important to follow journal formatting guidelines. I think you probably know that. I should tell you that at CellPress, we're in the early stages when a paper is first submitted to us, we really don't care much about formatting. We just want to know if the paper is interesting enough to send out to review. Because if it's not, then we're not going to ask someone to spend a lot of time formatting it. And this is important. I'm going to say it more than once today. Ask your colleagues to help you read your paper so that they can give you feedback on whether it makes sense, whether they can follow it. And by colleagues, I mean you should do your best to ask scientists who are roughly in your field, let's say they're also biologists, but who are not people who work right in your lab and know the work really well. If you're an immunologist, ask a neuroscientist to read your paper to see if they can understand it. You know they're a smart person, but they're not an immunologist, and they might really be able to help you with rough spots in your paper. Okay, so here's a couple of summary slides that we'll go over quickly that will be nice to refer to perhaps later, looking at the presentation. Manuscript preparation tips, emphasizing things like importance, looking at the guide for authors to make sure you're following the directions in how a paper should be written and referenced, using short sentences, checking the language. A title should be succinct. This is important. We often get papers with titles that are almost as long as the abstract, and that's never a good way to write a title, never. However, the title should describe what the paper is about and not be hopelessly vague. Make the main point clear and try to avoid abbreviations in a title. I told you that the abstract is extremely important. It should be some combination of interesting and understandable. If it's full of jargon that only 10 people in the world can understand, that's a mistake. If it's simply a laundry list of data points without a statement about what they mean, then that's a mistake. Brief and to the point. Depending on the journal, your abstract might have to be very brief. At CellPress, the abstract is only 150 words long, and that's pretty short. Okay, just quickly, what are the things that matter for an introduction? It should tell people where things stand. What's the status of the field? But presumably it will also then say there's something in the field that nobody yet understands. So that's how you set up the problem you're addressing. And then it'll identify in the introduction the solutions and maybe limitations of what you're about to tell them. Many people end their introduction by also summarizing what the paper found. And I think that's a pretty good idea. Sometimes it's not necessary, but it's what usually works. So a few points about an effective results section. It should be well organized and logical. It should be clear, easy to understand. You should draw out unexpected findings. It should definitely provide statistical analysis, both what tests were used and what the alpha level was, and details like that. This is an area of science that's becoming more and more important, that people are putting more emphasis on. Reviewers are starting to say you need to be clear about your statistical choices. And of course, high quality illustrations. In the discussion, the top box is the most important one. It is in the discussion when you tell your audience what you think your results mean. The discussion should roughly correspond to the results. In other words, it should cover the points that are covered in the results in roughly the same order, and then it should compare published results with your own. Now, one particular point, though, I want to make about the discussion, because that second point, make the discussion correspond to the results, could be a mistake if the really important and interesting finding of your paper is in the final figure, which is likely. It's likely that when you get to the final figure, you've got the final experiment that really shows the interesting, perhaps even surprising conclusion of your paper. And it would be a shame if you didn't talk about that until the end of your discussion. So what many people do, and I would recommend to you, is begin your discussion with a summary paragraph that's a little bit like an abstract that summarizes the findings of your paper, and then go into the details about what you think the results mean. That way, you get your key finding, that really important point that your paper makes, again, right in front of your audience. These are some basic facts about references. The rules for references vary depending on the journal, but it's really important to avoid things like excessive self-citation, excessive citations of papers from one particular place, things like that. Let's not talk about acknowledgments. Okay, here I've gotten what I think are the top 5 tips I can give to an author of a scientific paper. So first of all, getting a paper published is a collaboration.
Can I make a very quick interruption? I can see a lot of raised hands, so please keep your question to the end of the webinar, and then Stephen will answer all of your questions. And by the end, we can also agree on if we can give the mic to questions, or we can only make them through the questions through the typing. Okay, Stephen?
Yes, thank you.
Because I can see a lot of people, a lot of them, they are raising their hands. So we will answer your questions, but by the end of the webinar. Is it fine with you, Stephen?
Yeah, that's great. And let me just say, yeah, to the audience, you know, this webinar format that we're using is a nice way for me to be able to talk to you without flying to Egypt, which I did last year, by the way, and it was great. It was really fun to see Egypt, and I would gladly come back. But there's limitations, and one of them is that you can't raise your hand right now and get my attention, have me answer a question. So we're going to do that at the end, but it's a very, very important part of what we're doing today. I'm going to be absolutely sure that we have plenty of time for your questions. So please be patient, jot it down, and we'll get to it. So the point of this is to remind you, or to tell you that here, this slide, that getting your paper published is a group effort. It's, of course, there's probably at least a few scientists, perhaps many scientists, that participated in doing the experiments and writing the paper, but also now you're sending it to a journal, which includes editors and peer reviewers who are also doing their part to make everything work. So try to think of writing your paper and publishing your paper as a collaboration of a bunch of people. I would add, by the way, and this is something I've already said, but I want to emphasize it strongly, get other scientists that you know to help you as well. Scientists who are not right there in your lab, people who know biology perhaps, but not your particular field. They can help you too. I think we need to mute someone's mic. All right. Everybody okay? Okay, second tip. Again, I said it before. Tell a story. This is really important advice. I still think a lot of scientists write a paper as though it's some kind of clinical report, a set of facts written down on a piece of paper and offered to an audience with no help. That's not a good way to write a biological science paper, and it's especially not going to work for a paper at Cell Press. The paper at Cell Press needs to make it clear that there's a big question that you're trying to answer, why it matters, and how you're going to tackle getting an answer to it. This is important. I guess this is now the third time I've told you, recruit colleagues outside your area to have a look at your paper and tell you what they think. They can really help you. So I'd like to tell you that we have authors at Cell Press who submit their paper to us, and we send it for review because we think it's really interesting and important. It goes to review, it does really well. And the reviews come back, and we'll still tell those authors sometimes, your paper is hard to understand. The reviewers have given feedback on this and say that the paper is a little unclear. And you know what we'll tell them? I'll say, please recruit colleagues outside of your area to review your paper and help you rewrite it. We do this regularly. So it's not just for people who perhaps for English is their second language, or they're not a very good writer. It's not just for that. It's for everyone struggling to write a complicated, high-level paper for an audience that they want to be bigger than just the 10 people that they know who already know this. Okay. Down there at the bottom, pre-submission inquiries are mentioned, and I'll have a little bit to say about those later. Here is a question we get sometimes as editors at Cell Press. Does the cover letter matter? The answer is yes, we read it. We always read the cover letter. If you write a really short, boring cover letter, that won't hurt you. I won't throw your paper away because I don't like the cover letter. But the cover letter is your chance to tell the editor, specifically the editor, here's what I think is interesting about my paper. And you can do it in a different way than you do it in your paper. You do it a little bit more personally, a little bit more directly. This is where you can say, here's the background of my paper that might not be obvious. It's also a place where you can tell us about competition if you're worried about other labs that are working on the same thing, and it's where you can both suggest and request to exclude reviewers. And then finally, simplicity. The slide says simplicity is often a virtue. I'm going to change that to simplicity is always a virtue. Try to find a way to say what you're saying in a way that's clear to everyone. Now, there's limits to this, of course. When you were writing papers about beta-catenin phosphorylation and how it controls cell migration in a particular cancer, there are only so many ways to say that, and some of them will involve using phrases and words that not everyone knows. But still, strive to say things clearly, to avoid a lot of abbreviations and jargon, to write a sentence that a reasonably intelligent person that you know could read and at least guess what it's about. Okay. Choosing a journal. This is probably a very important question, and you may have questions about, well, how do I choose a journal for my work? And the first most important thing to ask is, well, who do I think should read my paper? Who's the audience? This is probably the first thing you should do. If you're writing a clinical case report, well, there's a particular audience for a clinical case report. If you would like to write a brief review article about a particular area of your field, that's one audience. And if you have a biology paper about a particular signaling system that you think is involved in really every aspect of cell biology, then you're hoping for a broader audience. So think about your audience. Who do you think is going to read your paper? The next thing really to do is once you've got a list of journals that you know are roughly in that area, and again, maybe you'll consult colleagues to ask them, then I would go straight to the journal's homepage and read their guidelines to find out whether you think the journal is suitable for you. One thing you're probably going to do while determining a journal is ask questions about impact factor and journal metrics. All of the Cell Press journals have very high impact factors. In fact, it's something we just don't talk about. We don't think it's a very interesting way to measure science or even to measure journals, but in fact, our journals are high impact journals. So this might be forced on you. It may be that your field or even that your promotion committee cares a lot about the impact factor of your journal. But I don't know. I hope someday you'll get to a place where what really matters is the impact of your paper and not the impact of the journal it's sitting in. So I'll have a little teeny bit to say about that, but that's not really our topic today. What I will say at this point is I would urge you to consider using Scopus, our very large database of journals and papers that's also part of the EKB, of the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. That is a resource that you should write that down. Scopus, S-C-O-P-U-S. This database is for any discipline. You can tell I'm talking a lot about biology today, but it would work for anything. And this is where you can find journals you may not have known existed. Definitely find papers and authors and laboratories and so forth. So there's a plug for Scopus. Yeah, a few words about journal metrics. There is the famous impact factor created by this secret company, ISI. That just adds up the number of citations in a 2-year period and divides it by time as a function of the number of primary source articles. Nobody even quite knows how they do it. But there are a few others that I encourage you to look at. The eigenfactor, which expands the exposure time to 5 years. Something called SIMIGO, I think that's how that's pronounced, which also accounts for the journal that a paper is published in. And then article level metrics, which ask questions about how a paper itself is cited regardless of where it was published. Things like altmetrics. You might consider this site here, journalmetrics.com. This is an Elsevier site that has all sorts of information about journal metrics, how they're done. It offers some alternatives, and as you can see up there at the top, it's powered by Scopus, the database I just encouraged you to have a look at for your own work. All right, transitioning to what does an editor do in all of this? So the first thing we do when a paper comes in is we read it. And I just want to encourage you by saying a paper submitted to our journal, Cell Reports, my personal journal at Cell Press, is read by a professional editor, always. We don't just look at the title and say, oh, we don't care about that. We always read and discuss every paper. We discuss them as a group, and our decisions are made as a group. We assess the importance of the question, the advance over the previous published literature, and then we decide not whether to publish the paper, but whether to review it. We manage the review process, and then after the paper is published, we work to promote it so that people will read it. So if the paper is a primary research article, we're looking at whether the paper is in the scope of our journal, whether the question is important. Now I want to stop here and say, I mean, every question is important. So what we're really asking is whether it's as of the level of importance that we publish in our journal. We look at a conceptual advance over previous work. We are looking at technical competence. Sometimes a paper is probably not worth reviewing because it just might not be using the sort of state-of-the-art techniques for answering the question. We look at whether it's clear and anyone can understand it, and whether it would be of reasonably broad interest. That is for a primary research paper. But I told you we also have journals at Cell Press that publish nothing but review articles, and basically all of the primary journals at Cell Press, except for the journal I work at, Cell Reports, all of our journals publish review articles. So what are editors looking for there? Typically, again, scope, something that's timely, so a review article about something that's happening right now and not necessarily a topic from 10 years ago. It's nice to have a fresh perspective, a sort of new angle. We want those articles to be balanced and authoritative, and it's particularly important that they be well written so that they can be broadly accessible. You know, a review article is often written for the purpose of reaching scientists who aren't right in a particular area. They're just neighbors to the area, and they want to learn more about it. So here's their chance to read a review article. It's your chance reading review articles to learn about areas of science a little bit outside what you do every day. Okay, what happens after the initial editorial evaluation? Well, there's two outcomes. One of them is the paper will be rejected, and simply meaning we'll return the manuscript to the authors and say, we don't really think this is a strong candidate for our journal. I'll give a brief explanation why. Often at Cell Press, we'll also recommend some journals that might be better. Perhaps you should try this journal. And in many cases, we can directly transfer your paper to that journal, so you don't have to do any more work, and that's pretty nice. But the other, of course, option is that we may send the paper for review. So then now it's our job as editors to find good reviewers, people who know the area and who know our criteria and who don't take 10 weeks to do a review that should take 10 days, things like that. By the way, some people, I've met scientists who are curious about how we editors use the suggestions that authors make. So we ask you to recommend, when you submit your paper, to recommend, say, 3 or 4 or 5 or as many as you want, reviewers who would do a good job reviewing your paper. And there are rumors out there that editors look at that list and then deliberately never invite those people. And that's not true. If you give us good suggestions, then we are likely to follow your good suggestions. Similarly, if you ask for 2 or 3 people to be excluded, and by this I mean you tell us, please do not send my paper to this professor or to this scientist for review, then we will honor that. It needs to be just 2 or 3 people, not 10, but we will honor that very faithfully. So just so you know, I can't speak for other journals, but at Cell Press, that's important to us. Okay. You might want to know, when we send your paper for review, what do we expect the reviewers to do with your paper? So we're asking them to evaluate the technical quality of the data, perhaps more importantly, the degree to which those data support your conclusions, and then talk to us about what's the level of interest here. Will this work be interesting to people working in the field? And will it also be interesting to maybe people working outside the field? So based on all those things, we'll make a decision. So we integrate all of the feedback we got on the paper. That includes the reviewers' comments, but also our own assessment of the paper and what we think the revisions are going to be. So what I mean by that is sometimes the reviewers will say, well, this is an interesting question, and the authors have gotten a good start, but they're going to need to do the following 6 experiments to get this paper in shape. And if those experiments are going to take 3 years, then that might influence how we make our decision. We also discuss as a team. There's 7 people on the Cell Reports team, and we all weigh in on our decisions. And sometimes we might actually go back to the reviewers to ask them for a little bit of additional feedback, especially if the reviewers seem to disagree on whether a particular experiment is important. After we've done all of that, then we'll make a decision about whether the paper should be published or revised or rejected. It's important for me to tell you, we don't simply add up the votes, and many scientists, I think, sometimes are a little confused by this. Sometimes a paper is positively reviewed by 2 reviewers and negatively reviewed by 1. And the reason for that is that that one reviewer who didn't like the paper has expertise in one particular aspect of the science. And so we may have to reject a paper because it's not very sound in one of its key aspects, even if other reviewers liked it. I hope that's clear. So it works the other way. If 2 reviewers are a little negative and 1 is real positive, but we look at the reasons, we might very well go the other direction. Okay, so I alluded to this earlier, and I won't go into it in a whole lot more detail, but we're also asking, okay, how close is the manuscript to being ready? Is it going to require an enormous amount of effort to fix or not? And if the authors are really not going to be prepared to do what it would take, then it's not fair to anyone to continue with the process. It makes more sense at that point than to say, okay, it would be best if you went on to a different journal. Okay, so once you've got your decision letter, suppose you've got a decision letter back, and the decision letter doesn't say your paper's been rejected, but it does say, you know, we really need you to revise the paper significantly in order for it to get ready. You know, what should you do? Well, you know, clearly just read carefully what the reviewers are suggesting and determine whether you can do those things. And if not, whether there are other things maybe that you can do that could answer the questions that the reviewers are raising. At Cell Press, and I think at many other journals, it is always appropriate for you to contact the editor to ask questions. Our authors do this all the time. Sometimes they don't understand what a reviewer said, or they just want to know, well, what are you expecting me to do here? And so it's never a problem to email an editor. Again, a Cell Press editor. I can't speak for other editors. All right, so then it's up to you to make a good revision, address the questions and the concerns that the reviewers had. When you resubmit your paper, you will include a detailed document explaining how you've addressed all of the reviewer concerns. Sometimes after this process, you may transfer your paper to a second journal, and we won't emphasize that a whole lot today. So what happens if you get bad news? And we all get bad news. So, you know, read the letter carefully, and I think my advice to anyone who's gotten a reject letter, especially after review, is to wait a day. Give yourself 24 hours, maybe a couple of days to think about it, because you're disappointed. Especially if the reviews are pretty negative and they really think that you fell well short of where you should have been, that's disappointing. So take a little time to think about what you want to do. But once you've done that, then go ahead and ask the editor if they can help you get a better understanding of why the decision went the way it did. Dialogue is encouraged. And if it really looks like the reviewers and the editor simply don't think your paper is a good candidate at that journal, then consider transferring to a different one. So at Cell Press and at most but not all other journals, there is a process for appealing a decision. This is an important thing. It's a quality check on the review process. We as editors do expect appeals. We call them rebuttals. I like the word appeal more. It just sounds more positive. Where after a decision's been made, an author will write to say, well, you know, hey, I think the decision is a mistake, and here's why. Or the author writes to say, now wait, those concerns that you raise, we can address them. In either case, in order to appeal a decision, you should prepare clear responses to the reviews. Those responses should be scientific and not, well, we think these reviewers are stupid. Believe it or not, I hope you laughed a little bit when I said that. Believe it or not, sometimes that's what people write to us, and I'm afraid I must tell you that we know our reviewers, and one thing we know about them is that they're not stupid. So it's better, of course, to stick to the scientific issues of saying that you think that a reviewer is mistaken, or to say, well, the reviewer has raised a concern, and we think we can address that concern. Those are scientific responses. Indicate how you can address them experimentally, be reasonable in assessing how everything went, and then know that one thing we editors might do is go back to the reviewers with your response to say, hey, what do you think? And, you know, I'm pleased to tell you, by the way, we might ask new people for advice, but let me just, I think you should know that it is reasonably common for an appeal to cause a decision to be reconsidered, and sometimes for an appeal to cause a decision to be reversed. we're happy when that happens. We don't think, oh, I made a mistake, I rejected a paper, and now I've had to accept it. We think that's great. So keep that in mind. You've gotten a decision, and you look at the reviews, and you think, well, hey, no, we can fix that. Write to the editor and tell them, I think I can fix that. Okay, what happens when your paper is accepted? You have a celebration, but you also have a lot of work still to do. You'll have to now organize all of the files to meet final instructions. The paper will be copy edited. At CellPress, it will be professionally copy edited, and then it'll be laid out for professional publication. It'll be published online and perhaps also in print. At Cell Reports, all of our papers are online. And then, as I've mentioned, it'll be promoted in various ways. So there's still a lot of work to do once you get that accept letter, but you still should definitely celebrate, call your parents, things like that. That's what I did. So take-home message, do exciting work, write about it, contact us, tell us about it. A few quick notes about some resources for you at both CellPress and Elsevier. I can only just do a few highlights here. I would encourage you to explore the websites or to ask questions about other things. But for example, at CellPress, we have a video publication guide where we sat down and talked about all these different things. You'll find that on the Cell website, cell.com website, and a lot of other things. Elsevier has a lot of resources for journal authors, and here are some links that you can follow to see suggestions for authors and things that might be valuable to you. Elsevier has a language editing service where you can submit your paper and have someone really go over it so the English is in really good shape. That can be valuable. In some cases, my impression is that the Egyptians I met were all didn't need as much help here. You guys speak really good English, but this is an important resource that could really help you at many journals. Issues of publishing ethics. I'm not going to emphasize these today, but these are sometimes concerns, not so much because you are planning on being unethical, no, but because you have to worry about plagiarism detectors and self-citation and concerns like this. So, try this publishing campus at Elsevier for various discussions of the things you might want to think about and tools for you to deal with some of those things. Sorry, that's just the link for that. All right, so being aware of and adhering to publishing ethics, here are some of the issues. Republishing work, that's a big problem. It says here it puts stress on the system, but it's also just unethical republishing work. Plagiarizing content, either your own content or that of others, is an obvious ethical issue. Fabricating and falsifying data. Here at CellPress, all accepted papers are scanned. The images are scanned by a system that's designed to look for image modification. Now, I really want to emphasize, friends, it is not so much that we're looking for evidence that people have falsified their data or engaged in very serious research misconduct. Well, we do find those things very rarely, and that's very upsetting when we do. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for really mistakes that people make when they've made a photographic figure and enhance the contrast a little too much, so now it doesn't really look like the original. We look for things like that, and our systems can detect them. Sorry, that falls under figure manipulation. Figure manipulation comes in lots of forms, and not all of them are evil. They're just accidental. There are very specific guidelines for using both human subjects and animals in research, and we require that it be made clear in your paper that you did your research under the appropriate institutional oversight. Improper author contribution, we now also require all our papers to list and specify the contributions of authors so that we know people aren't giving or getting credit when they really didn't do anything. Conflicts of interest, these could be financial conflicts of interest or other kind of conflicts of interest. Here are some more bullet points on publishing ethics just for you to think about, and I think you probably already know about all of them. The top one, almost certainly, and every now and then someone makes a mistake on this, is at any given moment, your paper must only be considered at a single journal. If you have a related paper that's under consideration, you really need to let the editor know. This is very important, and you can be banned from publishing at Cell Press for a long time if it's determined that you had your paper being considered at two different journals. I do want to, however, there's a big however that goes with this. If you're doing a pre-submission inquiry, you can do as many of those as you want to as many journals at the same time as you want. So that's different, okay? But once you've submitted your paper, it needs to be at only one journal at any given time. Issues of preparing figures to avoid over-manipulation, issues of conflict of interest, co-authoring, etc. So these are important things to educate yourself about, plagiarism and self-plagiarism. What happens if you found an error in your paper, either before publication or during review? Immediately contact the editor. There are various ways to work on that. Ensuring that you're ready and willing to provide shareable reagents and raw data with the community after you publish your paper. Issues of good scientific practice, and so forth. Knowing and trusting your collaborators and sharing the responsibility and the credit. So here are some other topics that you would be welcome to ask me about as we wrap up today. Strategies for appealing, how to do or whether to do pre-submission inquiries, how to write an abstract, the fact that at Cell Press you can submit your paper as a single PDF rather than going through that laborious process of uploading figures one at a time. You might want to read up a little bit about STAR methods, a new way of doing methods at Cell Press, and the problem of wordiness. But that's enough for me talking. I'm going to leave this slide up there so you can see my contact information, and you're welcome to email me. But let's stop and take questions and see how that goes.
So Stephen, you will keep watching the questions, right? And you will answer them through your mic. So you will read the questions and you will answer through the mic, okay?
Okay.
Okay, great. So for the attendees, if you have questions, please write them on the dashboard in your panel.
All right, so while we're waiting for people to ask questions, here's a topic that I think is pretty important and that I didn't discuss. So let's start with pre-submission inquiries. So what is a pre-submission inquiry? So this is it's basically an email sent to the editor or editors of a journal saying, here's what my paper is about. Typically, you provide the title and the abstract and perhaps one or two paragraphs giving the background of your paper, and simply saying, would you be interested in seeing the full paper? That's what a pre-submission inquiry is. It's nothing more than that. Now, there's two ways to do it. Certainly one way is to simply acquire the contact information for that journal and email them directly. Certainly at Cell Press, we are fine with that. I get them every day. People email me an email that says, hey, I met you at a conference and I know you like this topic. What do you think? However, you'll also find if you go to the journal website of any journal at Cell Press, and I think just about any journal anywhere else, there will be a form on the website that you can fill out to send a pre-submission inquiry. Okay, so now why would you do this? Why would you send a pre-submission inquiry? Well, I think it's if you're trying to gauge whether a particular journal is interested in the topic of your paper. Sometimes you already know that. So if you're writing a paper about roles for beta-catenin in a particular cancer, and you know that the journal is a clinical cancer journal, and you've got clinical data, then you probably already know that the journal is interested in your topic. But if you're not sure, or if you're not sure whether they would be interested in the angle that you took, that's why you would send a pre-submission inquiry. Now, when an editor responds to a pre-submission inquiry, typically all they're saying to you is, yes, this is potentially interesting. Please submit the paper so we can have a look. It's very rare that the editor would write you back to say, yes, this sounds very interesting. Please send in the paper and I will send it for review. Typically, and especially at Cell Reports where I work, there would be, we don't make that commitment. We simply say, let me see the paper. But it is definitely true that a pre-submission inquiry is something that you can do to multiple journals at the same time and get some feedback. And I think it's a pretty good idea, especially if you're not really sure the best place for your paper.
Okay, Stephen, we have some questions now. Can you go through them and answer them? We can start with the one with, what about the cost of publication? Can CellPress help in this issue?
Okay, so I don't see that question, but thank you for asking it. All right, so
I'll be reading them for you. So yes.
Perfect.
I'll
yes.
Be reading, yes.
Thank you. That's a great question. The cost of publication. Okay, so first of all, this refers specifically to the open access journals at Cell Press, and that includes Cell Reports where I work. So the regular price for publication in Cell Reports is $5,000 US, which is very high. However, it is routine that discounts are negotiated on that price, and that process of negotiating a discount is done by other people, not by me. So I think it's very important that decisions about pricing and about money be taken completely away from editors like me, so that I can simply make decisions about science and not about money. But I do want to encourage you that yes, Cell Press does work with authors on publication fees, works to find other resources for them, and then works on providing discounts. Now, of course, many of the journals, well, most of the journals at Cell Press don't have publication fees because they are not open access journals. And so there's always the option of submitting your work to one of those journals. But thanks for that question.
Okay, so going to the next question, not exactly a question for Stephen, but I tried asking Scopus and apparently it is not available in Egypt. Okay, Stephen, let me answer this question in Arabic quickly, if you allow me. Actually it's an important question. It's he's asking about Scopus availability. So يا جماعة Scopus is available already. Yes, Scopus is available عن طريق الإيجيبشن نوليدج بانك. بالنسبة للناس اللي هي الريسيرشرز اللي هم بيخشوا على النوليدج بانك، لو هم دخلوا على النوليدج بانك أول مرة من بره الجامعة مش هيبقى عندهم أكسس على سكوبس. لازم يدخل أول مرة فقط، مرة وحيدة من البنك المعرفة المصري من أي جامعة أو من أي انستتيوشن، معهد معتمد من الحكومة المصرية. هنا بعد كده هيبقى من حقه يقدر يدخل على بوابة الباحثين، يقدر يدخل على سكوبس من أي مكان في مصر. فسكوبس دلوقتي افيلبل لكل مصر ببلاش فور فري. اوكي، من خلال بوابه بنك المعرفه المصريه. لو دخلت عليه مره واحده من بره من غير ما تكون دخلت عليه مره من جوه الجامعه مش هتدخل عليه. تمام؟ طيب another question, taking another question, Stephen, we have only 17 minutes, so and we have a lot of questions. Another question is, should I upload the raw data with the manuscript?
Great question. Thank you. In general, no. In general, no. But this is actually changing right now, and there are now places like Mendeley where you can upload all of the raw data. For example, all of the scans of Western blots. Many people in the audience will know what those are, and simply provide the raw data in a separate place on Mendeley. So right now, no, you should not upload the raw data, but I think in a few years I might give a webinar and the answer would be yes.
Okay, another question. I published a review paper previously, however doing statistical work was pretty hard. I wonder if you have any tips that might help. Moreover, I'm not sure if using simple words in expressing what I mean is better or not. Please tell me your opinion. Okay.
Uh, so, is the question about statistics?
I think it's a question. I published a review paper previously. However, doing statistical work was pretty hard. I wonder if you have any tips that might help. I think he is asking
Oh,
about tips about doing publishing in an easy way.
yes. Okay. I think this question, it's Muhammad. Hello, Muhammad. I think this question is about, you know, writing a review paper about a technical topic like statistics is hard. How he says, I'm not sure if using simple words and expressing what I mean is better. So this is a great question. I hope you can understand what he's worrying about. What he's worrying about is, well, I can't use simple words to explain one-way ANOVA because there's no better way to say it, one-way ANOVA. And or you know, in my own field of neuroscience, you know, the parts of the brain sometimes they have weird names, and there's nothing I can do about that. If I'm studying the lateral habenula, then that's called the lateral habenula. So you're right. You're right that you can't always use simple language to explain complicated topics. At some point, you have no other choice than to use, you know, complicated language. So here's my tip, and unfortunately, Muhammad, it's a tip I've already given, and it might not sound very helpful, but the best thing you can do to make your work more easily read is to ask other people to read it and give you feedback. That at least they can tell you that, well, I don't understand this sentence, maybe you should try to rework the sentence. And that, if you do that, by the way, I'm talking now to everyone listening to me, not just a statistical expert writing a review article, anyone. If you do that and you ask the neuroscientist to read your immunology paper, or you ask the hepatic surgeon to read your paper about neurosurgery, I think it will help a lot. They'll be able to identify things that you say that you don't even notice that aren't very clear. So I'm sorry I can't do better than that, except to say that you're right. There's only so much you can do to make a paper easy to read, and then people are just going to have to go to college.
Okay, for Muhammad Reda, I didn't completely understand. Please, if you need to understand more, you can send me an email and I will explain more through the email with any more clarifications. Another question, Stephen, can you give us a median review time for a primary research paper?
Yeah. The initial review by the editor, 3 to 5 days. Then I think your question is probably about after the paper has gone out for review, and I think our median at Cell Reports is about 3 weeks. Probably three weeks, maybe a little bit less. Now we push on our reviewers, so our system automatically emails them if they're a day late. When they're, say, a week late, and by the way, when you're a week late at Cell Press, that's 17 days. We begin with 10 days. So after about 17 days, less than 3 weeks, the editor is personally emailing the reviewer to ask for a review. So for the first review, about 3 weeks. There's definitely frustrating times when it takes longer than that, and there are some happy times when it takes a lot less than that.
Okay, another question. There are a lot of problems with undergraduate research. Does Cell Press accept a paper written by an undergraduate? I think also before you answer this question, Stephen, also we need to refer to the sneak peek, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
If it's related to this question, yes.
Okay, so this question is from Hossam, I believe, and
Yes.
at Cell Press, we don't pay any attention to whether the author is an undergraduate or not. So we're only paying attention to the science in the paper, to the figures and whether they show what the paper says it shows, and to the nature of the question. I am certain that we have published papers that have had undergraduate co-authors, and we would be very excited about that. So there's nothing specific about being an undergraduate that matters at all to us. So that's my answer to that question. For sneak peek is something pretty interesting. I don't know if it's relevant to this question, but it would be nice to quickly mention it. It's simply a new program. It's kind of an experimental program we're doing at Cell Press, where once a paper has been sent for review at Cell Press, the authors can choose to have that paper posted on a Cell Press website called Sneak Peek that tells the world, hey, this paper is now being reviewed at Cell or at Cell Reports or at Neuron, and people can read the paper there.
Okay. Another question also after paper rejection from Shams. After paper rejection, can the author resubmitting the manuscript after doing a lot of important changes?
Yeah, Shams, thank you for that question. Well, the answer is yes. It's yes, but it depends. So when we send a rejection letter, sometimes our rejection letter is really a rejection letter. It's saying, we don't think this paper is going to do well at Cell Reports, and I encourage you to submit it somewhere else. Your paper is rejected. The only thing you can do at that point is then appeal. So write to the journal to say that you think that you can make the paper better. This is what you wrote. Can the authors resubmit the manuscript after doing a lot of important changes? They can, but first they have to write to ask whether the editors think those changes will get the paper into shape. So this is called appeal, and we do it all the time. And sometimes, Shams, I'm happy to tell you, sometimes the authors write. They say, here are the changes we're planning on doing, and we will say, okay, then we will reopen the paper so you could submit your revision. So the answer to your question is yes, but always it involves an appeal to ask whether the paper can be reconsidered. Thanks for the question.
Okay, another question from Medhat. I ask about how Cell Press takes to gain acceptance. I want to avoid duplicate publication.
Oh, okay. So once your paper is being considered at Cell Press, then it cannot be considered anywhere else. So how long does it take? The first review, about 3 weeks. Sorry, let me backtrack. The editorial review will take just a few days. And at that point, if we decide that we don't really think the paper is for us, then the paper is rejected and you're free to submit it anywhere you want. If the paper goes for review, then it's going to be in initial review for three weeks. Maybe 4, maybe 5 if things don't go well, but it's going to be in review for a few weeks. And then when it comes back, you'll have another option either to revise it or maybe it's rejected. So it's dealing with a publisher like us who's fast. You shouldn't have any problems with duplicate submission. However, I know there are journals out there that aren't fast at all and that take many, many weeks and maybe months, and now your work is tied up with a publisher and you can't submit it somewhere else. I think that's probably why you're asking the question, and that is a big problem. And so, Medhat, I would just say that if you have a paper that's caught up in review and it's been a really long time at some journal, then it's time to contact the editors and say, okay, my paper has been with you for a long time and this is a problem and I need you to either get a decision to me or let me submit somewhere else. So I hope that addresses your question. I hope that would never happen to you at Cell Press because we're a lot faster at Cell Press than maybe some other journals.
Okay, another question. I can see a question from Fatma. When do you recommend to submit my paper? Can we go through it quickly because I see also the question from Sadak is more important. Stefan, because time is passing. Yes.
Submit my paper to a journal or to a conference. When I just would say when it's done. I guess I'm not sure what that question is. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, let's and move to Sadiq question. If my supervisor, professor, can you read it?
Yes. If my supervisor
Yeah.
published a paper about our work and he omitted my name, oh gosh. Uh, so first of all, I'm very sorry that happened to you. That's a major ethical problem if that happens. So my advice to you is the first place you should probably go is to the institution. If the institution has a mechanism where you can file a complaint about this. Um, Sometimes someone writes to us right here at our journal to say that this happened to them. And we consider it a very serious, potentially ethical concern. And so we will respond to the person who wrote to us by saying, please begin an inquiry at your local institution and please tell us about it. So the first answer is, if your name has been omitted from work that you did, then you should probably find an institutional committee or authority that you can talk to. And you do have a right to contact the journal to tell them to. I'm sorry that happened to you. I
Okay.
wish I could do more to help.
Okay, another question from Nora about number of wording should be included in the covering letter.
Ooh, good question. Thank you, Nora. A cover letter should be a page or maybe a page and a half. Once it gets longer than that, it's becoming something a little bit more of a burden on the editor. So if you're writing single space or 1.5 space, and you've got your signature at the bottom, then I'd say maybe a page and a half is about right. Thanks for asking. That's a good question.
Okay. Any more questions?
Here's a question that Maha asked. Wrote, if I read an article or an already published paper and as an expert in the field I have some comments, how can I send my comments to the authors? This is a cool question. All right, so the first of all, almost every journal, every journal I know, the corresponding author has to provide their contact information. And right on a Cell Press paper, you can simply click on the link, click on their name, get their email address, and even click on the little envelope icon and email them directly. And you could email the authors that way. However, also at all Cell Press papers, you can leave a comment on the paper itself. So go to the paper, you're reading it online, and you think, oh, I'd like to make a comment. Well, there's a comment tab where you can write a comment, and the authors will see it, and so will everyone else who reads the paper. Thanks for that question, Maha.
Yes, and another question again from Fatma: when it is necessary to write a protocol, and what should it cover?
Good question. So this varies a lot. So typically, the actual protocol that is being used in an experiment is not something that's included in their experimental procedures, at least not at Cell Reports. Sorry, at Cell Press. You describe the methods you used, but you don't really provide the protocol. But every now and then, the protocol is an important part of what the paper is about. If you wrote a paper that one of its main points is that you have developed a protocol to specifically do a particular experiment, then you may very well provide the protocol step by step, including, how many minutes of centrifugation at how much force and things like that. And so that's very much a decision that you'll make based on what your paper is about. But in general, the procedures that you follow should be described so that someone can follow them, but not in the form of a protocol. Thanks for the question.
Okay, I just want to emphasize again before we close, because we have only 1 minute and 40 seconds, that Cell Press content is available for free through the Egyptian Knowledge Bank, guys. So if you want to download whatever you want from Cell Press, full access to the 18 journals, it is available for free through the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. Okay. This is very important for yes,
It is
professionals like
important.
you. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that everything.
Stephen, you have 1 minute and you have 3 questions or 2 questions. Yes. Can you go through the 2 questions remaining and that's it? There are 3 now.
Let's see. Tips about multi-center studies. That my only tip there is make sure everybody agrees on everything before you submit the paper, because sometimes papers that have a lot of co-authors, there are sometimes problems with assigning, what people did. So get everybody together on the same page. But otherwise, that everything's just fine. All right, so I know we have to stop, so I just want to emphasize 2 things. First of all, this presentation is going to be made available to you. I'm not sure where that will be. I assume it will be on the EKB, but everything in this presentation will be posted, including a recording. But also, just
Yes.
look there. The last slide has my email address, and I would be honored to answer email questions that you send me. That would be great. It would be my pleasure. So if you've got a question that you didn't want to ask or that I couldn't address, you're more than welcome to contact me.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for listening. It was a pleasure to talk to everyone.
Hi.
I'm still here. I've stopped the recording. I've stopped showing, and I think we're all done.
So we are not broadcasting now.
Let's see. I think we might still be broadcasting. How do I stop that? Dashboard, duration, attendees.
So okay, Stefan, let us talk through. Let us talk through the link. Okay.
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 So should I turn off the?
Yes. Leave the webinar. Yes.
All right.
Yes.